Hello Internet, it's time for another Wednesday's Serial. This time I'm doing something a little different. I'm doing a response to one of Howler Mouse's videos because really he was just calling out some characters of the past with bad costumes to kind of prove a point about if you haven't seen Avengers vs. X-Men has this thing where there's I think it's a Phoenix 5 or something where they redesign some characters and it looks pretty bad. But one of the characters he called out on a bad costume design was Marrow, who, if you're unfamiliar, was a pretty much 90s X-Men character. And where I'm with him, the costume's pretty ho-hum. There's a reason for that. And also, I'm sure he wasn't expecting this, but it's all over the video if you look at the comments. A lot of the characters he pointed out are a lot of fan favorites. So that's why I'm doing this video, because Marrow's one of my fan favorites. He also pointed out Booster Gold, and someone went on about how Booster Gold's a great character, but I tried to point out to that guy, it's true, but part of the reason Booster Gold works as a unique character is that you're supposed to approach him first as a really goofy guy, and his costume's there to emphasize that. They've streamlined that and changed it a bit over the years, but you still kind of can't get past that. But he is a cool character, but yeah. But in Marrow's case, I feel it's something really different. I mean, in a lot of ways, she doesn't even really have a costume as much as she's just wearing clothes. So I thought I'd get to that. So for some general overview, for some stuff that I personally haven't even read, but I kind of looked up, if you're familiar, long ago in X-Men canon, there was a situation called the Mutant Massacre, where a lot of people fighting for humanity went in and basically tried to commit genocide upon the Morlocks. If you're unfamiliar, the Morlocks are a bunch of mutants who lived in the New York sewer system and kind of resented humanity a lot more, and there's some ties with the X-Men, but that's a whole nother thing. But during that massacre, Gambit, who was found out to have led all of the Hellions, I believe it was, to go kill all the Morlocks, snuck out one child kind of in a way to try to repent for some of the guilt. Yeah. But that child was Marrow, as you come to find out way later, and it certainly wasn't planned at the time, clearly. She went on to kind of make some brief appearances as one of the Morlocks. Her mutant ability being that she had extraneous bone growths that she would tear out of her body and use them as like clubs or shivs or whatever the situation kind of called for. It seemed like as time went on she could kind of control the bone growths a little bit more and whatnot. Part of the reason I like this so much is, A, that's a really inventive idea, and when it comes to the X-Men mutant powers, inventive ideas, I think, is worth a lot after a while. I mean, what's next? And that was a crazy cool idea. Also, in the idea that these are mutations, the idea that there's just extraneous growth in a way that can be utilized in a weird way, but also kind of disfigures them and makes them less human. A, plays the metaphor of what X-Men should be about, which actually X-Men was really good about in the 90s, which is part of the reason why I look back at those comics saying, why can't they have some of those elements now? And also, I mean, just, ripping out bones. Crazy. There's a few other moments with Marrow throughout Marvel history, but she didn't really make it big until the X-Men were kind of ready for a new phase, new creators switching over, and they were kind of taking some stuff. And Joe Kelly was coming onto the X-Men, and I think he had a bit of a hand in Operation Zero Tolerance, but when he really kind of got to recast the team, he did something really interesting. It was all in the wake of Operation Zero Tolerance, so there was no mansion. Scott and Jean took off to go do some marital counseling. That went well. And just a whole bunch of other stuff. And it was the 90s, so who knows what else was going on in other books. But this is kind of the cover that launched all that. And you have Marrow, Maggot, who is another character that they pretty much introduced here, his mutant ability being that he could control these two maggots that could eat pretty much anything. He was kind of like a Gambit akin, whereas Marrow is more of a Wolverine akin. Maggot just kind of talking funny and never really went anywhere. I have a few issues because I was trying to figure him out, but kind of glad he faded into the background. But Marrow did eventually as well, and sad about that. Another interesting character is Dr. Celia Reyes, who is another one of these, fan favorites of mine that came out during this time. She was really interesting for two reasons. She was a full-fledged doctor, medical doctor, and that's how they found her, because they needed her to operate on Cyclops, because somewhere in Operation Zero Tolerance there was a bomb planted in him, and she had to help get that out, and that was the whole thing. 90s X-Men. And her ability was to project a defensive force field. They eventually played with it a little bit so that she could have a little bit more interplay in the battlefield, but she was an interesting character to have there, and interesting to have someone with that kind of profession come on to a team like the X-Men. She actually struggled a lot with wanting to go back to the hospital and do a lot more good as a doctor than she ever would as some crazy adventurer. That's a side note. Back to Marrow. So this is X-Men issue 72. If you want to know where Marrow came from, where the start of her character arc really was, and before I get too much into that, this issue is written by Joe Kelly, who seems to be the master of character arcs within comics. I mean, you can point to a lot of different things that people do well and all that. This is one thing that he does in a way that no other creator that I've ever seen has been able to do. If you need an example, you need to look at his run on Deadpool, which is extensive and mostly collected in overpriced classics editions. But his ability to take a character from one point and make them something completely different, no matter how you look at it, Deadpool from where he was to where he is now, even though Waze is a sick bastardization of where that character should be going, is irrevocably tied to the Kelly run, and in a certain ways can't revert back to where he was before the Kelly run, because that's not the character anymore. In a lot of ways, this is similar to what Kelly did with Marrow, which is part of the reason why she's one of my favorite characters. Any character can be good or bad, it's how they're written, and this issue, Wolverine versus Marrow, and it is exactly that, really showed that she was like the original trouble child. Like, they're trying to do so much and build with her and try to make her someone better. So I mean, it may have been a bit over the head, but I mean, that plays the idea of the X-Men being a school trying to better these people. Also, Marrow had essentially a plan. I mean, she wanted to kill humans in a lot of ways. If you look at Charles Xavier as kind of a Martin Luther King character, she was very much more influenced, not directly by Magneto, but much more of a Malcolm X philosophy. And here they are trying to show that there's a better way. In this way, they had to play on that metaphor directly. So this issue opens up with Storm cutting away the dead leaves of a plant, kind of looking at the ugly parts and cutting them away. They build on this metaphor in a lot of ways, but essentially this is how Marrow views how the others view her. It's only a matter of time before they cut out the ugly one, her, because she's disfigured. She has an ugly costume. And then, while she's staying at the X-Mansion, on her door to the basement where she's staying, she's carved in the wall, "This way to a dark ride." And so Wolverine, now that some things have cleared up, goes down to try to deal with her. And the reason for this is pretty clear. Storm can't really deal with her because Storm has all these ties to the Morlock and it's too much going on there. And Wolverine's kind of, the alpha dog, and she's very much, instinct and all that. So Wolverine starts kicking the crap out of her and kind of fighting her, cutting her down a little bit to earn a bit of her respect. In a lot of ways, talking to her in a way that only he can, because he recognizes her anger and all that, and it's very much the way Wolverine kind of used to be written. But then Wolverine's like, but there's a better way, there's a second chance. And she goes, kind of bent over, humbled, a second chance has set things right, kind of the corny comic dialogue you get. When she just, bam, comes up, takes one of her bones and sticks it through his throat, dropping Wolverine. Which says a lot about her fighting ability and where she stands on the team. Wolverine snaps Berserker Rage and starts to basically kill her until Cannonball comes in and makes sure they don't kill each other. That's where the issue ends. That's where this character started. And she's supposed to be on the team. I don't know, I just don't see, even with some of the stuff they're going on with Wolverine the X-Men, I don't see that kind of tension played in that way. Maybe it's a little over dramatic to some, but the way it was written, it just felt intriguing and it worked at the time. Then another reason why she's one of my favorites is here's 2 of the 3 issues of Marrow and SpiderMan being together. You have someone who's basically this much of an anti-hero on the X-Men and then team up with kind of the character that shows what heroicism is supposed to be, even to someone like Captain America. It worked, and it made for an interesting thing, and when she saw that someone on the good was recognizing the bad happening to mutants, and he himself is more of a human, though it does kind of raise the question in the Marvel Universe, if you don't know that Spider-Man was bitten by a radioactive spider, why wouldn't you assume he's a mutant? Anyways, it's kind of odd to see that interplay, and it worked really well, and in a lot of ways I liked it. And to be fair, this is where I was introduced to the character, because, Spider-Man X-Men crossover to 12-year-old me was the height of comics. So, but after some of these interplays, the real thing that brought Marrow down and made her part of the team wasn't so much the big, grand actions and the big battles, but just the day-to-day, and in order to get along with the team and the people she was living with, she needed to learn to cope and to coexist and be a part of something more than herself. In a way, you see that that's what made her such a rotten kid to begin with, was because she was raised with the Morlocks, and the way she learned to survive was to cluster with them and screw everyone else, and that's the environment she was raised in. Once she started living in this environment and saw that it was better for her in kind of a better way, that's when the character slowly started to change, up to the point where something really drastic happened. She had to fake her own death, and then she somehow ended up on a Weapon X team, I guess, and I have no idea what happened there because I've never read any of that, and near as I can tell based on what I've heard of the sales figures, next to no one else did either. So there you go. When I say based on the sales figure, I mean something in the late 90s, early 2000s that was X-Men related that can only last 21 issues, when essentially it's Wolverine spin-off. I guess that's about where things happen today too, so it was just one of those ones that wasn't received well. But I might be curious to check it out now that I can probably find it for cheap. If anyone's read that, I'd love to hear what you think about it. Yeah, and if you have any characters that you know might not be well received, I'd love to hear about why you guys like that character. So yeah. Questions, comments, death threats below, and I will check you next week with another Wednesday serial. Also, as a side note, I didn't even go to the comic store today. There were 3 comics I was going to pick up. One was Avengers vs. X-Men. One was Journey into Mystery, which I'm heavily considering dropping because the steam and momentum of that book has really gone down. And now that I've taken a look at some preview of Gilligan's run in X-Men, I'm really seeing some of the stuff that I wrote off as awkward because he was writing as Guardian characters with the dialogue is really seemingly because he writes really stale dialogue. Which is, I didn't realize he was writing it, but now that I put that together, and that's why I'm not buying Uncanny X-Men, it's kind of spins my view on it a bit, and where the book started and where it is now is definitely a quality drop. And then the last one is Thief of Thieves, which I'm interested to read, but I'll pick it up later for sure and read it. Yeah.